Thanks, everyone. This is the Ask April and Cindy series, and I'm April.
And I'm Cindy, so welcome. Hi, welcome everybody. Tonight is our second series of destinations, and tonight we're talking about Belgium.
Thanks for joining us. This is April, and tonight we're pleasure to talk to Janna and Jamie about their trip to Belgium, which they took about a year ago with a group of other beer lovers. They're former brewery owners themselves, so they have a deep love for beers and an appreciation. And we all know Belgium is all about the beer, so I'm super excited to have them join us tonight.
So how large was the group, and were they all from the university there in Colorado, or just from everywhere in the United States? Or
they were from all kinds of places. We traveled with a bunch of breweries, local breweries here in town. We traveled with some of the professors from the brewing program at the university, and we had about 40 people on the trip.
Oh, wow. So where did you start? Tell me about some of the places that you stayed. Did you stay with locals? Tell me a little bit more detail about the trip.
We started in Brussels and we ended in Brussels. And in the meantime, we went all over the country. The only place we didn't go was Antwerp. But we were able to see a lot of the northern part of the country, so a lot of Brussels and Bruges. We went to Ghent, and then in the southern part of the country, we stayed in Dinant, which is right near the border with France. And we also stayed somewhat in the middle of the country. So kind of every night we were moving around, but we did stay a total of 3 nights in Brussels, and we did some day trips from Brussels as well. So it gave us a good opportunity to really see the whole country, which was nice. That was definitely a benefit of doing a group tour. We had a bus, we had a driver, and we were able to explore a lot more of the country than we might have been able to do on our own.
And it also sounds like maybe you had some access to places that you might not otherwise get access to, like some of them. I noticed from the photos, some monasteries, and tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was kind of the appeal of going on the trip, was getting access to these places. And we kind of got almost a behind the scenes tour at a lot of these places, but even said, the general public can go to all of these places and see everything that we saw. We may have gotten
skip the line.
Yes, a little bit, but we found out that we weren't treated like we were any different than anyone else. We just were able to, be able to go a lot of places within the country, and having a tour on a beer-related tour, because obviously when you're touring monasteries or breweries or whatever, you're obviously consuming beer. It's good to have a driver. So being on a tour and not actually having to drive yourself is definitely a plus.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Are there special items that you would suggest packing if you were going to do a trip like this, or were you restricted being in a group as far as luggage or anything like that?
We brought a lot of beer, like to give to locals, to give to our tour guides as kind of a thank you. And that was really appreciated. So that was pretty fun. We brought some of the beer that we had brewed. And then people on our tour also brought beers from a lot of local Colorado breweries. And so it was really fun to be able to thank the tour guides that way. So if you're going to Belgium and you're planning on doing any beer tours, I would definitely recommend to bring some local beer wherever you're from. But also bring something to bring beer home if you're interested in bringing beer home. A lot of people brought a whole dedicated suitcase. We didn't do that, but we left room in our luggage to be able to bring a small amount of beer back. Some people brought boxes or got boxes where they could ship the beer back. So that was another thing to plan ahead for. And then a lot of the streets are old, cobblestone. And so just comfortable shoes for walking and like a backpack, to be able to carry things around. It's pretty rainy in Belgium. So rain gear, an umbrella, raincoat, are other things that I would say definitely be sure to pack.
Perfect. So food, tell us about the food. Any must-eats in Belgium? Anything that's kind of unique to Belgium? I noticed you had some wonderful photos.
We had a lot.
Yeah, obviously. The obvious choice, they're known for their waffles and frites. I think the thing that surprised me the most was the waffles. I always assumed was like a breakfast item. It's not the case in Belgium. They eat them all day long. They have savory ones. The toppings that they put on these, it's pretty ridiculous, all the different options that you have. And then the frites or fries, they're everywhere. So there are little stands everywhere where you can grab delicious fries. And so plan on eating your fair share of fries and waffles. And
also mussels. Mussels were really, really good. They're kind of seasonal, but delicious. And then rabbit stew was another thing that was really popular. A lot of times it's made with local beer. And so like rabbit stew over fries was another really popular dish.
Yeah, but
that's different.
Yeah, those were the typical Belgian kind of foods that you saw everywhere. But they had everything from, we had really good Italian food. Mm-hmm. We had good pizza.
The breakfast was delicious.
Yeah, the baked goods at breakfast were fantastic. Being next to France, I'm sure has a bearing on that, because the croissants were still fabulous. So.
And a lot of the monasteries produce cheese as well as beer. Oh. And so that was another really popular item. A lot of people brought cheese back. Some of it didn't, last so well, but a lot of the monasteries would produce cheese. Some of it would be soaked in the beer that they make. And so like a popular thing would be to go to a brewery and get a cheese board with your beer, and you can kind of sample the different cheeses and the different beers. So that was a lot of fun as well.
All right, so we got to talk a little bit more about beers. Describe to our beer fans, is a Belgian beer more of a dark? Do they tend to do more dark beers, light beers? How would you tell us about the beers?
Well, I would say yes to all of that. You can get, they make light beer, they make dark beer. I think the biggest thing with Belgian beer is, a traditional American beer typically is flavored with hops. So, you probably, heard like IPAs are really popular right now in America, and it's kind of an American thing to make a really hoppy, really strong tasting beer. So in Belgium, it's a little bit different. Hops are used in a different way, whereas the yeast is really the big flavor component in the beer. So in Belgium, you get a lot of like clove and spicy notes, like pepper and lemon and all these kind of flavors, but it all comes from the yeast that actually ferments the beer. So
there's also a lot of sour beers in Belgium. A lot of like fruited sours, a lot of aged beers, like lambics, which are like spontaneously fermented beers. So a lot of
which that is the yeast. We've got yeast all around us, so they actually let the yeast in the air ferment the beer, and that will make a lambic style beer. So that's another really popular beer there.
So
I was just gonna say it's a really like unique and regional way of making beer. So a lot of the beers that you get there, like you couldn't reproduce anywhere else in the world. It's unique to the particular brewery in Belgium.
That makes it very interesting. So do you have some favorite places to get beer that you really kind of stood out as a must visit or?
I'll let you go first.
Well, one of the monasteries we went to, Orval, which is in the south of the country, was gorgeous. And they really only make two kinds of beer. One you can actually get in the United States, but then they make a potter's beer, which is what the monks drink. It's a lighter ABV, a lighter alcohol beer. And it's just sold in one little restaurant that's near the monastery there. And so that was really fun. So we can get the regular beer here. So it was fun to try that. And then we went to a brewery, a monastery called West Veteran, and that is considered by many to be the best beer in the world. So that beer is extremely hard to get in the United States. A lot of people pay a lot of money for that beer. And so we got to go to that brewery, do the tour and kind of sit outside in their courtyard and drink the beer. So that was really fun. Cantillon is another famous lambic. That's a lambic brewery that's in Brussels. Again, like very highly sought after beer. It's hard to get in the United States. And so we were able to go there as well. But we also did some local breweries that were a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Talk about like Dedala.
Yeah, I mean, we went to one where they weren't even open, and they opened up especially for us, which was super cool. But the owners were a husband and wife, and I forget how long they had owned it, but they were pretty much the only employees in this massive brewery. And he did all the brewing and she did everything else. And it was right in the middle of all this farmland, and it was just beautiful, really fun place to go. The crazy thing about that brewery is you can find the beer here. It's hard to find, but it's a little tiny brewery, but they make it all the way to the United States. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, so that was just a lot of fun. The beer was great, and I think just the countryside surrounding it just made it that much better.
So other favorite destinations that you stopped at, any of the little towns that are must-sees if people are going to Belgium?
The one that comes to mind is a town called De Nantes. It's kind of set in this canyon, and it is just beautiful. There's a river that runs right down through the middle of town, and they kind of everything is built along the river, but then there's just canyons, sheer cliffs on each side. There is a monastery there, or actually, I'm sorry, it's not a monastery, it's an abbey. But it's set up on the hill that kind of overlooks the town. There's the
Citadel.
Yes.
Like a fort that they used that was built in like 1600 or something. But it was used to protect the city through wars all the way up until World War I.
And so you can visit that, and there's just views that are just incredible. One of the coolest places I've ever seen. So.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. So did you have a travel mishap or any lessons to share?
A little bit. When we got to Brussels, we met our tour guide and our bus and everything. We were supposed to go directly to the city center. We were going to do a tour and check into our hotel. And there was like an unannounced political protest going on. And so the bus literally could not get into the city center. And so we drove around for like hours trying to get to the hotel and to the square. But this protest had shut down all of the streets. There was no way to go. And so we basically had to drive around until it dispersed. And then we were finally able to get in. But it was a long, we had been flying all night, had been traveling to get there. And we're like just anxious to get to our hotel and like get some food and a beer. And we had to drive around the city for hours. But it was nice to see the city. We just went by the same thing like multiple times.
Right. And unfortunately, in those situations, there's nothing you can do to change it. You're pretty much just,
Yeah,
I guess,
Yeah.
lay your head
exactly.
back on the bus and wait it out.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think the other
So
thing is, oh, I'm sorry, I was going to add
no,
one
go
more
ahead.
thing to that,
Yeah.
one of the drawbacks I think of being on a large tour in a big bus is obviously things were built a long time ago. It's the streets and even the little towns in Belgium aren't set up well for a big motor coach. So patience is another thing that we learned. We may have to drive an extra half hour because we can't cross one bridge because it won't hold the bus. So that's something else to think about when we're going on bring your patience.
Yeah.
Right. So if you went back would you go back to Belgium? Is it a destination you'd go back to?
Yeah,
we've talked about it definitely, because it was a bit like being on a cruise in the sense that we stopped for a short period of time in a lot of places. And so I think we'd like to go back and spend more time in the places that we really enjoyed. And we only had like a half day in Ghent, just one day in Bruges. And so I think we would definitely like to go back and spend a little bit more time. We were there for 10 days and we went to a lot of places, but the place we got to spend the most time was Brussels. And so definitely I think we'd go back and just spend some more time in the places that we really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it sounds like an amazing trip, but as any large group trip, you brought up some great points about, you just bringing your patience and being flexible, and that's just all part of travel, but sounds wonderful. So we're going to open it up and bring Cindy back and ask if anyone's got any questions.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, so we're here to answer questions. I think we'll just wait for a few minutes. April, maybe there's a couple more questions we can ask Janna and Jamie while we wait to see if anybody has a question for us.
So, Janna and Jamie, thanks for joining us and doing this chat about Belgium. And I may have asked you, if you went back to Belgium, would you do a group tour? Would you do it on your own? Are there things that you would, look to do if you went back? And what time of year would you might consider going back?
Well, yeah, I think if we went back, we would do it on our own. We would take the parts of the trip that we really enjoyed and go revisit some of those places. As far as time of the year, I think either the spring or the fall. It seems like that's the time to be there. So yeah, we would probably go back around the same time.
Yeah. Were there favorites that you had, Janna?
In terms of places that we went, I really enjoyed like the southern part of the country near the border with France. It was really pretty country, really friendly people, good food, less busy than some of the big cities. So I think for me, I'd like to spend some more time in that part of the country if we went back.
Yeah, definitely. And you were in Bruges too, if I remember.
Yeah, we did go to Bruges, and I would probably spend more time up. That's in the northern part. I would probably spend more time in that area. There's a town called Ghent that we did get to stop in. It's a lot like Bruges. We would probably spend a fair amount of time in that town too.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember just from my short time visiting Belgium as well, just the chocolate, walking down the streets and smelling the chocolate.
It's so beautiful, like the way that they, decorate and design each piece.
Yes, and the little shops and the way they display it. I mean, it's just so inviting. I just really, they really take pride in their shops, if I remember.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, you guys must have done just a fantastic job sharing all the things Belgium, because we don't have any questions. I can see that everybody's still listening to us and is on board. We haven't lost our listeners, but I think that maybe there aren't questions. I was hoping that we might have a couple that we could answer, but we will at the end. A little bit later, we'll add some of the content that we talked about today. So maybe some of the places that Janna and Jamie visited, as well as maybe some of the beers and those kinds of things. So when I send that out, we'll let everybody know. And was there something else, April, we wanted to add to the description also to give people?
I think we'll probably include some tips on. I know you mentioned, Janna and Jamie, people actually purchasing the beer and shipping it home. Sometimes that's a good thing to mention, to check with your airlines or check with, depending if, like, because certain places I'm sure did ship for people versus trying to pack it in your checked bag. Or I know you spoke on that a little bit.
There were some bottle shops, like in Brussels in particular, that would arrange for shipping to the U.S. So that was definitely an option for some people. And then some people just privately sought out like a FedEx location in a town where we were and arranged for them to ship as well.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people on the trip just brought an extra bag and paid. It was actually cheaper to pay the baggage fee. And
was it? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So,
and I know there's lots of different, like, I've seen different stuff in the airports when you go through, like, bubble and different ways to wrap it. Do you have any tips on that yourself, or?
I pack it in my clothes. But,
hey.
so I will say the nice thing about Belgium is the bottles that the beer comes in are very thick. The glass is about 3 times as thick as bottles in the United States. So the chance of them breaking is a lot less. And the reason they do that is because the beer is so highly carbonated. They need to be able to hold the pressure. So, it's as long as it's packed somewhat well, I think it'll probably make it.
Right. Yeah, that's a good idea, to wrap it in your clothes and then like stuff it in a big plastic bag or something.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I know online they make actual luggage that has spots for bottles. I think and a lot of the Belgian beer bottles are the same size as wine bottles, and I think they're made for wine bottles for people who travel and want to bring back wine. So.
That's interesting, huh?
Yeah, I think there.
Yeah, and they kind of will foam it.
Yeah, I think there are some traveling packing items for wine. I certainly seen that. We do have a couple questions, so I'm going to get those for you. There's Joseph is asking. He asked how many people were on the tour. What you guys were on.
There was, I think, about 40 to 45, so it was quite large.
Okay.
Group. Yeah, so we had quite a few.
Okay, and then he also asked who put the tour together. Do you have the name of the organization that?
Yeah, it was put on by kind of a couple of kind of groups. One was Regis University, which their brewing program that they have there. They have a brewing program, obviously, that they some of the faculty actually was on the trip with us, so they helped. And then there's a brewery here in Denver called Brews, B-U-R-Z, and they're a Belgian-only brewery, and so they helped as well. So they kind of facilitated a lot of the where we were going, kind of helped organize what we needed to see, what we didn't need to see, because a lot of those guys had been on the trip before.
I see. And just So, and you mentioned earlier that you guys didn't see anything that other people couldn't see on their own, even though you went with the tour group. If somebody was planning a trip like this on their own, it still was possible to do all the things you guys did, correct? Just to clarify.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know a couple of places we got to go when they weren't open, which was nice because we didn't have the other tours. But yeah, everywhere we went, everyone would be able to see.
Yeah, and they probably did that too, because if there's 40 or 45 of you, that would have inundated, their normal business hours. So I guess that, that's probably pretty typical for a large group. Yeah, to give you.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's why some of them, they allowed us to come during off hours, so we didn't hinder all the others wanting to do the same thing.
Right.
Right.
Right. Okay, I think I don't have any other questions, but as I said, everybody is still here and listening, so I'm really pleased that we've kept everybody's attention. I'm really excited. I've thought about going to Belgium, but it hasn't been high on my list. But it seems like every time we have one of these talks, I have to add a new country to my list of places to visit. So thank you guys so much for sharing.
Yeah, that's always the dilemma. Too many places at too little time.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure since Belgium is such well known for its beers, I'm sure they probably have some beer festivals as well, just geared towards that.
Yeah, I know they do. I think each town has different festivals, different times of the year, and I know Belgium's really known for Christmas beers, and I know a lot of the towns has I think a lot of Europe has pretty neat Christmas, celebrations and decorations. But yeah, all the breweries make a special beer for Christmas as well.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, okay, I think we can probably wrap things up.
I'll have to look up some of those.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks. Go ahead, April. Okay. And then, so we're talking, what are we talking on Monday about, April? Do you have that? It's,
Monday we'll be talking about, oh crap.
I can't remember that, but you look for that. I know on Wednesday we're doing the French boat ride through southern France with Coco. So that's what's next week, a week from today. And then it may be...
Right. And then on Monday night is our travel skills series, and it's traveling with others. So it's always a challenge to travel with others, or can be a wonderful, wonderful experience. So we're going to be discussing all of that on Monday.
Right. Okay, and so if you guys have enjoyed what you watched, go ahead and like our video, and you can subscribe down below and get updates when we do more of these, and we will be back here on Monday doing our travel tips. So thanks, Janna and Jamie, for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Take care.